Yeah, welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Got a pretty interesting show for you here today. Going to talk about, what do we talk about? The never-ending GOAT debate. And why are we talking about the never-ending GOAT debate? Because, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers just got, gentlemen swept out of the playoffs, 5-1 against the defending champion Denver Nuggets. And, of course, with everything that happens or doesn't happen for LeBron, there's further discussion about his place in history. And of course, the GOAT debate. There's a lot of people who think he is, a lot of people who think he isn't. But we're going to talk today, or I guess we're going to talk about and hear the commentary of someone who knows a whole lot about greatness. But before we get to that, if you're here on YouTube and you haven't already, please make sure you go ahead, click that like, that subscribe, that notification bell. Make sure you're kept up to date whenever we drop new content on the channel. If you want the audio-only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in The Format Podcast, and we should come right up. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you give us that like, that 5-star review, and drop a comment. All that stuff helps us rise in the algorithm, helps us find more sports fans, helps more sports fans find us. And finally, make sure you write it down, put it in your phone, set an alarm, do whatever you got to do to remember. Saturday nights at 7 p.m. we are live here on the Format Podcast, and we'll give you the opportunity to call in, talk to us, get at me. I love it. I can't wait. So, as I mentioned before the little blurb there in the intro, we're going to be talking about a guy who knows a whole lot about greatness, and that guy is Robert Horry, aka Big Shot Bob. And there's a reason they call him Big Shot Bob. That guy hit a whole lot of big-time shots throughout his career. He's one of the greatest role players who's ever played in the history of the National Basketball Association. He's a 7-time world champion, and you got some idiots out there who say, well, if it's about rings, then Robert Horry should be better than Jordan, right? Which is absolutely nonsensical. But the reason they say that, let me just go ahead and knock that out. The reason they say that, and the reason it's different, is obviously because Robert Horry was a role player and Michael Jordan was the A1 guy. Just like LeBron has been the A1 guy on his teams and Kobe Bryant's been the A1 guy on his teams, etc. So you can't compare a role player, no matter how many championships they have and no matter how much contribution they did to said championships. For instance, Steve Kerr is a 5-time champion as a player. He's a 4-time champion as a coach. But those championships that he got as a player, he got, I think, 3 with the Bulls and 3 with the Spurs. 3 with the Bulls and 2 with the Spurs, or vice versa. But the point is, nobody's ever going to compare him to, let's just say, a point guard, Isaiah Thomas, because Isaiah Thomas was the man and Steve Kerr was a role player. That's no disrespect to Steve Kerr. He played his role and he played it extremely well, and he did his part to help bring championships to the franchises he played for, but it's not the same. Same thing with Robert Horry and Michael Jordan. But anyway, the reason I bring up Robert Horry, and this is actually a show I wanted to do for a couple of months now, but with everything going on, we were leading up to the NFL draft. Of course, we were leading up to the NBA playoffs, and now we're knee deep in the NBA playoffs. But as I mentioned in the intro there, with the Los Angeles Lakers and, of course, LeBron James being gentlemen swept out of the playoffs 4-1 against the defending champion Nuggets, again, it's another opportunity to discuss his place in the pantheon of basketball greats. And so why did I go to Robert Horry? A couple months back, I found a very interesting clip and an article. I think it was Fadeaway World. I found the article, and it had a very interesting clip in terms of his take on who are his top 3 basketball players of all time. And the reason I'm going to lend a lot of credence to what Robert Horry has to say is because this is a guy who has been around greatness at every stop in the league. He understands what it is to win, and he understands what the all-time greats are about, how to get there, what separates them, and what makes them all-time great. And so for those of you who want to say, oh, Robert Horry, he don't know nothing, he's just a role player. Well, he's Big Shot Bob. He was a contributor, and realistically, there were some of those championships. If he didn't make those shots, those championships would not have been won. And so he was a contributor who hit major shots and played his role to a T in terms of helping his team get championships. And he has been around, like I said, all-time greatness, so he understands what it is. He won 2 championships early on in his career with the Houston Rockets. So he got to play with Hakeem Olajuwon, and then in 95, he got to play with Hakeem and Clyde Drexler. So those are 2 Hall of Famers. Clyde Drexler is a top 10 small forward of all time. Hakeem Olajuwon's a top 10 center of all time, maybe top 5, depending on who you are and where you put him. I truly believe, and I've said this before many times, I believe Hakeem is the greatest center of all time because he is the second best two-way player of all time, and he had the greatest offensive skill set of any center I've ever seen. But a lot of people don't agree with me on that. That's fine. You got Kareem, you got Shaq, you got Wilt. I'm sure a lot of people would put those guys ahead of Dream. I personally wouldn't, because they couldn't do the things Dream could do. I saw Dream work out a young, super athletic Shaq in the finals. But anyway, this is not about Dream. If you want to hear my thoughts on Dream, actually, I got a couple of shows on that. One is Kenny Smith made a bold proclamation. I think that was the name of it, basically saying that he believes that his championship Rockets would have beaten the Bulls had they played them while Michael Jordan was away playing baseball. If Michael Jordan was in the league and the Bulls had made it to the finals, he believes the Rockets would have beat them. So that was a good show there. There was another show that I did basically talking about how I believe Olajuwon is the most criminally underrated player in the history of the NBA. And there's another show I did with a guest, and he talked about the 1995 Rockets being one of the greatest championship teams of all time. So all those are ones where you can check those out and get my thoughts on Dream. Now, moving on from that, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but moving on from that, Robert Horry also won 3 championships with the Kobe and Shaq Los Angeles Lakers. So if you're keeping count, that's 5. And obviously, we know how great Shaq was in his prime. That Shaq was completely unstoppable, and we know what Kobe was doing at that time. A lot of people want to say Kobe was carried by Shaq, but I believe through those 3 championship runs in the playoffs, Shaq averaged 29 a game and Kobe averaged 28 a game. So I don't know how that's being carried, but we know who the people are that said Kobe got carried by Shaq, and we know why they're saying it. I don't need to go into that. Next up, he played and won 2 more championships with Tim Duncan and the San Antonio Spurs. Not just Tim Duncan, but Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker, and I believe Steve Kerr were on those championship teams as well. So the point I'm trying to make is Robert Horry has been in very close proximity to all-time greatness for his entire career, so he knows what it looks like and he knows how to evaluate it. So for those of you who want to say, well, Robert Horry don't know nothing, well, he played at the very highest level. He was a contributor on all those teams. He won 7 championships. I think he knows a little something, so we can put that to the side. Now, this was interesting to me. Robert Horry, here were his comments when he, I guess, was asked about his top 3 basketball players all time. I'm going to put this up on the screen for you. MJ is 1, Kobe is 2, and LeBron is 3. I don't think that MJ had a flaw in his game, said Horry. People say he couldn't shoot threes, but he could shoot threes when he wanted to shoot them. He just didn't need to shoot threes. Kobe is the same way. And I think LeBron is a great player. I'm not knocking LeBron. He's still 1C, and Kobe's 1B, and Mike is first. I know the body of work these guys put in, but is there a flaw in LeBron's game? Yes. Was there a flaw in Kobe's game? Yes. Was there a flaw in Michael's game? No. And that, I believe, is generally the opinion that most players and most people who look at all 3 kind of hold. Kobe was, we often say, as close as anyone is going to get to being like Mike. Remember, there was the whole thing, be like Mike, and that wasn't just an ad campaign. That was something that many players were actually and legitimately trying to do, and Kobe was the one who got closest to doing it in terms of the way his body moved, in terms of the way he played, in terms of mindset, in terms of competitiveness. And he was one of the very few players that had absolutely no fear of Mike. He went at Mike from the time he was 18 years old. And once he got a hold of Mike's phone number, we know all the stories. He used to call him in the middle of the night. How you do this, how you do that, blah, blah, blah. You saw the clips of him. He would be talking to Mike during games. Hey, how you do this, how you do that. And at first it started out like he was trying to mimic Mike. And a lot of people give Kobe a lot of crap for that. But at the end of the day, doesn't it make sense to try and mimic perfection? And we know that Michael Jordan is pretty much basketball perfection. So why would you not try to mimic that? And so Kobe did everything he could do. He worked himself into exhaustion. He wasn't quite the athlete Mike was, although he was an incredible athlete. He wasn't quite the athlete Mike was. So he worked and worked and worked on his technique. He worked on his footwork. All these are things that made him so incredible. He had such an incredible offensive toolkit, tremendous handle, tremendous footwork. He could play in the post. He could take you off the dribble, like everything. Just about everything that you could have, Kobe had it. But it's like when you make a copy of something, that copy is not quite as perfect as the original. That's kind of what we got with Kobe. And a lot of people want to take shots at Kobe and say, well, he's 44% from the field for his career. Well, that's a bit disingenuous, because Mike, being, again, basketball perfection, is 49 and change for his career. He was over 50%, about 51 prior to the Wizards years. And the Wizards years we know were marred by injury, so there was going to be some step down from his level of greatness. But the fact is this: Allen Iverson is about 44% from the field for his career, and he's one of the best two guards ever. Ray Allen, I think it's about 45% from the field for his career. I think Reggie Miller's about 47. So Kobe being about 44.5% from his career for a guy who made his life in the mid-range and wasn't at the rim all the time like LeBron was, well, there's nothing wrong with that percentage. Now, could it have been a little higher? Yes, but the LeBron fans want to use that to attack Kobe Bryant, and I don't think that's necessarily how you want to go about it. But let's go back a little bit, and here's the deal. Robert Horry, we know, puts Michael Jordan first, as do most players and most fans. They put Michael Jordan first. And what we're seeing here, as you look on the screen, is just, one, the incredible quickness, the incredible athleticism. We saw Michael Jordan just do scary, scary things. This right there was when he had 35 points in the first half of an NBA Finals game in 1992 and hit 6 threes. And so that was kind of what Robert Horry was saying. Well, if Michael Jordan had wanted to hit threes, he would have, focused more on that and hit more threes. And I totally get it. But that wasn't Michael Jordan's game. If he wanted it to be his game, well, he would have done that. But that also wasn't the way the NBA was played back then. Yes, you had shooters, you had snipers, but the goal was to try and get to the rim and get the highest percentage shot. And generally, that was closer to the rim. That's what math says, right? The higher percentage shots are the ones closer to the rim. I still don't get all this analytics stuff now saying the open corner three is the highest percentage shot, blah, blah, blah. But again, I'm not a mathematician. That's fine. But yeah, we saw Michael Jordan there. And the scary thing is, we're so enamored with Michael Jordan's offense that I didn't even put any defensive clips in there. And we know Michael Jordan was an absolute terror on defense, despite what other people may want to think about that. Okay, so Robert Horry has Kobe Bryant as 1B. Remember, I talked about that kind of the photocopy you make that's not quite as perfect as the original. Well, that's Kobe Bryant. And let's look at him here. This is a guy. Now, right before this, he had turned the ball over, going behind his back and trying to split a double team, but he ran down the play and got the block. Then we see Kobe with extreme athleticism. We see him with the tricks, being able to put it off the board and get it back. We see him turning his back in the air in the lane. There's dunking on a young Dwight Howard. This last clip here is from the 81-point game, which is the second highest scoring game in NBA history. Kobe was absolutely, absolutely incredible. And part of the reason that I put Kobe ahead of LeBron is because, again, Kobe had a much wider offensive skill set. He's a better ball handler. He's a better mid-range shooter, much better mid-range shooter. He had better footwork. He was better in the post. And just offensively, he could do more things. He could do more things in the air. He was more creative, not quite as powerful, but still powerful in terms of attacking the rim, much like Jordan. So again, he was MJ-like. That's what I've always called Kobe. And he was absolutely amazing to watch. And if you're so young that you weren't able to see Kobe play, it's all on YouTube. Go back and actually watch what this dude was doing. And the fact is, no matter what we think about LeBron, and LeBron has had an absolutely incredible career, I got to say that, right? He really has. He couldn't do the things that Kobe could do. It's just that. People say that Kobe couldn't pass like LeBron. Well, I think the difference is more so Kobe had a completely different mentality than LeBron. He wasn't looking to pass like LeBron. I think one of his teammates made him a bet one time saying, you can't get a triple-double tomorrow night or whatever the next game was. Kobe said, all right, cool, I'll take that bet. And so Kobe was scoring, rebounding. He had 9 assists in the first half. And going into the locker room, I can't remember if it was Brian Shaw or who the teammate was, but the teammate looked at him going into the locker room for halftime, and Kobe said, I can do this anytime I want, but that just wasn't Kobe's game. Kobe's game was to try and kill you scoring the basketball. He was a shooting guard, a true bucket getter. And that's what he was about, demolishing you and destroying you mentally by putting you in a position to know that you cannot stop him no matter what you try to do. So there's that. Now, Robert Horry says 1C, which I don't know. I wouldn't put him 1C. I don't put him that high to be on the same level as Kobe or Jordan. But Robert Horry says LeBron James is 1C. Now, we're talking about a guy here in LeBron James. Obviously, he's had a tremendous career. I got to say that again. This is a guy that, and I think it is worth noting that all-time leading scorer, and again, 40,000 points, 11,000 rebounds, 11,000 assists. That type of production, obviously, we've never seen before, and is phenomenal. If there were certain other players who came up in this era, I think they could have done that too. If it was Michael Jordan, I believe he could have done that. If Kobe came up just a couple of years after, like came into the league around the same time as LeBron, I think he probably could have been, really challenging for the all-time scoring record as well. If Wilt Chamberlain had come up around that time, I definitely think he would have been right there in terms of the all-time scoring record. We heard Wilt say that if he had known anyone was going to get close, he would have put that record out of reach. And that was a record that he made in only 14 years. I think it was 31 or 32,000 points, maybe 33,000 when he said it. And he did that in only 14 years. And of course, he did it without a three-point line. So we got to look at all that stuff, take it into account. But regardless, I think probably the most impressive thing we can look at when it comes to LeBron is 25 points a game or more over 20 years, 2 straight decades, scoring 25 points per game or more every season. Phenomenal. I really can't say anything about that. But now when you look at what LeBron is doing, and this is something I've talked about constantly, the scoring is incredible. But when you actually watch him play, his skill set is so much more limited than Kobe's was and then Michael Jordan was in terms of offensive toolkit. He's bigger and he's stronger than those guys, got it. But he also plays in an era, and I've talked about this as well, he also plays in an era where the floor is spread out and where he doesn't have to be attacking the rim against all-time great shot blockers. I talk about that all the time. That makes a difference. The majority of his shots going into maybe the last 2 or 3 years were within 0 to 3 feet of the basket. You can look that up on Basketball Reference. It's there. So no rim protection, or a lot less rim protection. The rules made and the way the game is played so guys can attack the rim a lot more. And, well, he did it. But at the same time, you got to put the ball in the basket. And LeBron has done that more than anyone in the history of the game, whether it's NBA or professional basketball, period. So got to give him his due for that. 4-time champion, got to give him his due for that. 4-time finals MVP, only person with more finals MVPs, I believe Kareem and Jordan. So that's it. So he's in very, very elite company with just about everything he's done statistically. So we can't argue that. But when you are talking all-time greats and comparing these guys, what happens? You nitpick. You start nitpicking. And when you look at it, you use your eye test. You use the stats, not total stats, but when you use the actual stats, the breakdown, then you see there's no question Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. And it's a fair argument that Kobe Bryant is ahead of LeBron. And if you go back and watch other shows I've done on this channel, there's a legitimate argument that Tim Duncan may be a greater player all time than LeBron. A lot of people aren't going to want to believe that because Tim Duncan is not a guy who's out here, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at what I did. He didn't care about that. But if you go back and watch the totality of his career, you could argue his career was greater than LeBron James. Whether it is or isn't, that's a different argument, but the argument can be made. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on this. I thought it was really neat that Robert Horry came out and he said what he had to say. And again, I think the biggest reason that we got to lend credence to what Robert Horry says when he talks is because this is a guy who has been for his entire career in extremely close proximity to greatness. So Olajuwon and Drexler with his first 2 championships. The first one just with Olajuwon in 94 and then 95, Olajuwon and Drexler. Then, of course, he wins 3 championships with Shaq and Kobe. Then he wins 2 more with Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili. So he's been around a lot of Hall of Famers. He knows what great looks like. So when Robert Horry tells you that Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time, we probably should listen to him. All right. So leave your comments in the comment section. Can't wait to hear from you on this one. What do you think of what Robert Horry had to say? Is he just an old head hater? Keep in mind, he played from 1992 to 2008. So he played across a couple of different basketball generations. So it's not like he just played back in the 90s and only knows that. And he played around a bunch of Hall of Famers, so he knows that too. So yeah, I'd love to know what you think about Robert Horry's comments on who the GOAT is and what your order is. So leave your comments in the comment section. Can't wait to hear from you. I'll be back with you on the next episode, and I'm out. Peace.